What I do a lot in the book and in general is just try to give a way to think about large swaths of history or particularly big ideas like machine learning. And I think one way or one framework in which to view the history of technology is just simply with the concept of leverage in mind. You know, a lever being the Archimedean sort of sense of a lever. You know, it gives you an ability to move something that you wouldn't otherwise be able to move just with your own might. And really what technology is, it's the invention of tools to give us leverage. And if you think about it that way, if you use that lens, you think about the first generation of tools that gave us physical leverage. And so they were things that quite literally were what we think of as a lever, but also physical leverage in the sense that, you know, a weapon gives us the leverage physically to kill an animal that's bigger that we could wrestle with our bare hands. And you go through to the industrial era. I mean, that takes us through pretty much 4,800 years of history of technology through to the industrial era, where what is a factory? It's just a collection of lots of little mechanical levers that allow us to build things that we couldn't build quite simply with our own hands, like tables, steam engines, whatever, chairs, everything. The second wave of leverage, I think, and that was granted by technology of tool building was intellectual leverage that we got through computers and calculators more broadly. You know, we could do more calculations than we could do by just writing them out using a machine. And so obviously a lot of these early computers were things like what Ada Lovelace and Babbage imagined and then invented, but then moves us right through to the start of the 20th century with IBM making actual computers. And then the real computer as we think of it today, the von Neumann computer, where you have a notion of something going in and out of memory and then being processed. And they gave us intellectual leverage in that they enabled us to think through problems in ways that involved many more steps than we could hold in our head, but also gave us the ability to then make some basic predictions. And this brings us into the third wave, I think, of technology, which has really only been the last sort of 60 or 70 years. And it started really with why von Neumann wanted to invent the computer, which was to predict weather. And that was something that took a while to do really well, but at least it was there at the beginning. And what is this third wave really giving us? It's giving us decision-making leverage over the future. And that's what's really powerful about it. You know, the first wave of tools that gave us mechanical leverage really gave us some power over our very immediate existence. Were we able to eat or not? Were we hot or cold? That sort of stuff. The second wave that gave us this intellectual leverage gave us a little bit more breathing room, so to speak, like an ability to make decisions a little bit further ahead of time. You know, where is all my stuff? How much does this person owe me, using a calculator? But this third wave that gives us decision-making leverage gives us a lot more breathing room. And that's the idea. You know, if we can predict the weather, we can predict well ahead of time if we're going to have enough food. You know, we're going to have enough food next year. Or are we going to have enough steel to make whatever we need to make next year, enough steel to make enough cans to put the food in, so to speak. So they're the three waves roughly, I think. And, you know, of course, this is just if you look at things through the lens of leverage and you think of technology as the building of tools to give us more leverage.
Okay, so you've got these three waves. The first wave, Stone Age, it is physical leverage.
Yep.
You have a second wave, that's the printing press, that's informational leverage. And you have then this third wave that we're obviously now in, which is computational prediction, which is temporal leverage, right? As I think you describe it, right?
Yeah.
And I think that winds us into the kind of current age, which you describe in a terminology that I think will shock nobody, the AI century.
Yeah.
And you say though, and this thing I think is particularly interesting, is that we've now been in this for 75 years in essence. And so can you explain a little bit about how that's evolved and what kind of takes us to the current day?
Yeah, I think what a lot of people don't realize is the AI first century started in 1950, not 2025. Everyone feels right now like AI is exploding. And it is, because we've already been working on it for 75 years. And actually, the AI first century, in my view, will probably end sometime in the next 5 to 25 years, before 2050 for sure. What does that mean? It means we will have fully exploited AI and we'll be in a whole new realm, which we might cover later in this interview if we have time. But the 50s were when we really started understanding this notion of a neural network. And a lot of people came at it differently. Some people came at it by trying to understand the nervous system. So literally shocking frogs, applying electricity to the nerves of frogs and seeing how their muscles moved based on that electricity going through the nervous system. Then trying to sort of understand what a neuron was and then recreate it on a basic computer. And so there were two guys, McCulloch and Pitts. They were really the first to do this. Then once they had like a very basic neuron working on a computational substrate, like with an old valve computer, then some people that were studying in a similar area, like physically in Boston, such as Marvin Minsky, started thinking about, all right, what if you have multiple neurons connected together? You have a neural network, and he started calling it the society of the mind. And what other minds could you create if you had multiple sort of artificial neurons there? And then there was famously a bit of a dark period because a lot of what they thought would happen didn't happen, and then research funding was taken away and whatnot. But in other parts of the world, like in Canada and all over Europe, people continued to develop this notion of a neural network and made some interesting progress right through to when you get to 2012, 13, and people started working on what was called, or making work, deep neural networks. So multiple layers of these neural networks. And that's when really the modern AI era started, when you had deep learning computer vision systems getting amazing results in image recognition, and then that being transposed over, or transferred really over to speech recognition, speech generation. And then you get to today where we have these transformers that are versions of these deep learning networks that transform a lot in very simple terms to be able to understand huge volumes of text, like the meaning, multiple layers of meaning in unstructured data. But the point is, it all started in the 50s. You know, language translation at IBM in the 50s and 60s was a big area of research. And that was machine translation of text, which is what we're mostly doing today in the AI industry, which is doing it with much more powerful computers, much deeper networks, and a much better understanding of how we can instantiate and run those networks on a computational substrate. So it's been going for a while, and we're really getting to the pointy end, I think, of the AI first century now.